I feel that beneath our layers we are positive beings, and we do look for positive ways to be with each other. I choose that belief over the other one, which is the one we've kind of built our society over, where if left to our own devices, we'll tear each other apart. And you go and live with someone like the Panan, who are anarchists, by the way, who have no leader, no law, no shamans, no chiefs. And they are, allegedly, the most peaceful people on the planet.
Hi, I'm Amisha, and this is episode 5 of the Future is Beautiful podcast. Thank you to all of you for your kind feedback over the past 2 weeks. We really appreciate you sharing how these stories are affecting you, as that's why we're making this. My guest today is TV presenter and filmmaker Bruce Parry. I first met Bruce in a forest about 4 years ago. Tribes had been on my list of shows to watch for years, but I'd never quite got around to it, so I didn't know who he was when we met. We had an immediate connection and stayed up talking by a fire most of the night, becoming good friends. I was immediately struck by his curiosity and openness as we shared our journeys from the head to the heart. I love these words he shared about our book. Knowing what is possible inspires change, and we are capable of so much more than most of us even dare to dream. In this episode, we sit down together in London and speak about initiations, celibacy, what we can learn from Indigenous tribes, and his new film, Tawai. I hope that you enjoy this interview and that it inspires you in some way. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community, or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. I'm delighted today to be joined by Bruce Parry, who is, amongst many other things, a real explorer, but somebody that really goes in and to many places that none of us have ever been, and really tries to understand and learn about different cultures in a really experiential way. So welcome, Bruce.
Thanks, Amisha. So nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you too. I guess a really nice place to start would be to get an understanding of how tribes happen. So you were a Marine, and then at some point a transition happened and you found this opportunity.
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, after leaving school I joined the Marines, and then I quit and went to university at about 23, and then quit that, started leading these expeditions to Asia, working with rhinos and turtle and orangutans and doing these wonderful science and conservation expeditions in Asia, which was amazing. Then I got in the film industry, and then and then Millennium came along, and I decided I was going to go and climb a mountain in New Guinea because I thought I wanted to go to a place where no one was even celebrating Millennium, just to go and have an experience. And because I had been in the film industry for a bit, I thought, well, I'll take a camera. A friend of mine said, why don't you take a camera? So I did, and I took a friend, and we raised some money from a production company, and that film ended up winning awards all around the world. It was my sort of first foray into that. And I enjoyed it so much, I thought, this is great, let's give this a go. So I sort of did a couple of jobs for the BBC, children's BBC, taking kids to the jungle, working with orangutans, taking kids to the desert, working with rhino. And they did very well too. And then, so I was kind of already in-house BBC, not a household name or anything, but I was just like doing work. And then the Beeb decided they wanted to do something about Indigenous peoples, and my name came up. They asked me to make a pitch. So I got together with Steve Robinson, the series producer from Cardiff in Wales, and we did something and got the gig. And that started me then on a completely different tangent.
And had you when you were doing stuff that was more kind of nature-based, had you come across indigenous tribes before on your travels?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. When I used to lead these expeditions out into Borneo and Sumatra, Sulawesi, Seram, Ambon, these places, there were always wonderful indigenous groups in every one of those areas that I went to. But the aim then wasn't to be with the indigenous peoples. I was mostly working with conservationists and scientists studying these various other things. So they tended to be nearby, or we would visit them if we were trekking, or perhaps some of them would come and help when we were doing various things. But so they were there, but I wasn't interacting with them as much as I ended up doing in the TV work.
And it's probably a really difficult question to answer, but when you started doing tribes and you found yourself in these cultures, how was it to adjust and be open to different ways of life?
Well, actually, having had the journey that I'd had already up until that time, having been a public school, boarding school kid, joined the Marines, very institutionalized in lots of ways, very Christian. So in every sense I was an institutional kid. And then sort of after leaving the Marines, I had had a number of things that had made me really question a lot of that which I'd already kind of seen as an ultimate truth. And that was thanks mostly to amazing girlfriends who maybe it's like, Bruce, why you stood to attention in front of the television when the national anthem's on, kind of thing. Get back into bed. You know, it's like, I mean, it was that bad, almost. You know, I was fully in the machine, and so I had had a number of experiences that had made me look at the world differently and look at myself differently. And I had a big mushroom trip, for example. I was so against drugs, growing up fully against them, and then had this experience when I was out on an island in Indonesia, and it was just like the most horrific, not very pleasant experience, but had definitely woken me up to something at the same time. And so moments like that where I had just looked through a different prism and realized that so much of my prejudice that I'd had before, suddenly there was another way of looking at it. I realized that I didn't know everything. And so when I was going to now talk to the world about indigenous peoples, I'd better be humble and I'd better be attentive and open and let go of my thoughts and prejudices, because I may well be wrong again. And that way of going in and listening served me very well.
I remember you sharing once that there was, like, at some point there was like a deepening for you of that experience, and a kind of a switch from sort of like media, like kind of, you know, like recording the experience, to just really, really wanting to embody and integrate and be with the tribes.
There have been a number of moments that have really been big stepping stones for me. I don't know the one exactly that you're referring to, but I mean, like the first trip that I did was to the Babongo people in the Congo, and at the end of that, we didn't even know what the films were going to be, the first series of Tribe. It's like we were kind of experimental. We knew that I was going to just go and live with them, but how far I would go and what I would do wasn't really ascertained, and they invited me to do this initiation ceremony called Iboga, or a Bwiti ceremony, and taking this ritual medicine plant substance called Iboga, and the crew were like, or the director was like, well, you don't have to do it if you don't want to, you're crazy. If you ask me, there's no way. It's like madness to do that. That's like terrifying. And I was like, no, they've invited me, I think I'll do it. And that moment was a huge catalyst moment for me.
It's such a powerful medicine.
It was such a powerful medicine, and it really, I mean, it comes across a little bit in the film, but of course, the reality of having that versus what I'm putting into a BBC documentary, there's a huge gulf of difference. It's like the real insights and the real awareness and the real shift that happens in me as a being was much more that I could ever really express. And also some of these things take some time to fully integrate. And that was the beginning of awakening. But it's also very true, I think, fair to say as well, that although I had these extraordinary moments like that, I was so busy. I'd come back from that trip and then talk to friends of mine who I looked up to, who were much cleverer than me, like doctor friends or whatever, and say, I had this experience of expanded consciousness, and they would just go, well, Bruce, you idiot, you're just taking a drug, There's nothing more than that. And I go, okay, yeah, fair one, yeah, sure, and then sort of stick it in a box marked drugs, and then just get on with my life, because I was too busy to really figure out what actually was happening. And then I'd be on to the next tribe in another part of the world, and then sort of living this ever faster lifestyle, moving to Ibiza and becoming celebrated then after the first series did well, and then suddenly life just takes off in all sorts of different directions. So it was a complex, exciting, wonderful time, but it wasn't a full time of integration.
Yeah.
It wasn't that at all, really, initially.
And I guess we met for the first time, like when you were coming out of a time of integration. So you'd had a few years to really, I guess, create some space and awareness around all of the experiences that you'd had.
That's right. So that was, so I did 3 series of Tribe, spanning a number of years. And in the middle of that, I also went off and did a trip across Greenland, pretending to be Captain Scott. But that was interesting for me, because I went from this very high octane, overstimulated lifestyle and celebrated lifestyle to suddenly being on this white sheet that just went on forever, without mountains or hills or anything, just flat as far as the eye could see forever. No birds, no trees, no foliage, nothing, just white everywhere. And going kind of mad, having sort of going cold turkey on this addiction to stimulation. And that did something to me. That made me realize something about the mind and something about how I wasn't in control of it, and I didn't like how it was running. It would sort of runaway train. And that was a big moment. And then I carried on doing the series of Tribe, and then I did the trip down the Amazon, which was essentially a look at globalization and the effects of essentially our way of life on the world and way of life of other people like us. And then it was all so much that I took 2 years out. I said, right, I'm going to take 2 years out. And it was during that time that I started to begin to assimilate the information that I'd been receiving. A number of other things happened to me that made me go back to those boxes that I'd stuck all those things in, because they were too complex to explain, and then take them out. One of those was when I saw that amazing lecture, TED talk by Gilbert Taylor, where the lady who has a stroke in the left hemisphere of her mind. And I remember her describing this stroke and how amazing it was for a brain scientist to study the mind from the inside, having had this stroke, and her motor coordination sort of dysfunction and all these things. But I remember her saying at one time, she looked down at her hand and she couldn't see where the molecules of her arm ended and the rest of the universe began. It's like the whole thing melted into one. And I remember going, oh my God, that's the experience I had when I was doing the iboga, that my friend said, oh, you're just doing a drug. And I was like, wow, that sort of inspired me to take those things out and reevaluate them and say, oh no, there are clever people, there are brain scientists, there are people who are having different perspectives on what this might be. There is something more to this, perhaps. And it was during that time as well, having had this difficult time in the Arctic, and then getting so much attention that I was kind of losing a little bit of control, and turning to drugs to kind of hide from all the attention. And then a friend of mine persuading me to go on a meditation retreat, and that being... Actually, I went on that first meditation retreat kind of to shut my mates up, who kept going, you needed to do this, you need to... I'm like, we would meditate, and I was like, you guys are just losers. You're not any more special than anyone else. I'm going to go and do the retreat just to show you it doesn't do anything. And sure enough, it absolutely changed my life. I mean, just the most amazing gift. So these things kind of happen. And then another one, which is the one you're referring to, was I had the great fortune of going to Colombia to meet the Kogi people, which was another group that I'd heard a lot about, and they're very esoteric. And I was very interested in them, but I didn't kind of necessarily believe all the things that were being said about them, how special they were and their ability to connect in the universal mind and all these things. But I was fascinated, and I was definitely opening to stuff. And so I went to meet them, and it was during my time with them, many things happened that when I was with them. And there's definitely, I was like really struck by them. It's like, wow, you really are a very, very special and interesting group. And then they invited me to make a film with them, with the person Alan Herrera, who'd made the film 20 years before, which had been a very seminal film on this group, and sort of brought them to the attention of the world. And so I was going to make the sequel, if you will, with Alan, which was going to go deeper into how these people really were able to do these sort of very special things.
What's a very special thing?
Okay, so the sort of the fables and folklore stories around them are that they can make it rain, and they take some of their infants from a very young age and train them in complete darkness for 9, 18 or 27 years. Mm-hmm. And so some of these people, the mamos as they call them, the priest leaders, are very few, there's many mamos, but very few of them get this very special treatment where they're taught in complete sensory deprivation in darkness, literally for their whole childhood.
Wow.
And then during that time taught to meditate, taught many things, but one of them is how to listen to the voices of nature herself, and then finding ways through observing bubbles in water and a number of other things to divinate and to ask questions of the interconnected cosmos as they see it. And this whole idea that everything is created first in a mind, in a luna, and then only when it's concentrated on in there can it then manifest in material form. And all this stuff, it's very, kind of, we would say, is very new age, and kind of most people, including myself in lots of ways, back then would just like give a bit of a wince and go, yeah, not sure about any of that. But I was opening up to these other thoughts. And anyway, so I went to meet them, and I was so fascinated, and I was like, okay, I'm still a skeptic, but I'm not ruling it out, but I'm definitely not there yet. You know, I mean, like, you guys are certainly interesting, and what an amazing opportunity to come and have the possibility of exploring this with you. Thank you, what a gift. I mean, I totally felt humbled, and I wasn't like aloof, but there was a little bit of my mind that was still questioning. And anyway, as I was leaving, I said, well, how can I prepare? You know, I felt so honored. And they said, well, give up sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever it is, and then maybe you'll be able to get your mind in the right mindset to be able to understand a little bit more about where we're at. And I was like, no chance, guys. There's no way I'm going to do that. And then they're like, okay, don't. And then I said, no, okay, well, now that it's not an order, maybe I'll give it a go. Thinking it was only going to be a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Thinking it was only going to be a few weeks.
Big sacrifice.
Well, yeah, no, even that was a big sacrifice, believe me. I was having a great time. And, I mean, really, I mean, just the thought of doing it at all was hard, but for a few weeks that was like unheard of. And so I took it on board, but in my head when I said yes, I'd always thought, well, am I really going to say this story now? Are we going down this path?
I think we are.
Oh my God. Okay, so so basically, in my head when I said yes, I was like, well, I've just started a relationship with someone, and actually, in our physical time together, it hasn't been as good as I think we could have been. And like, so my ego or pride or whatever it was like, well, I'll start my abstinence after having made sure that everything's okay. So, I came back, and sure enough, I engaged in some physical intimacy with my dear friend, but literally within minutes. Literally within like no time at all, as soon as we're kind of finished, I get a text from the BBC saying, oh, there's a problem with the film, with Alan, whatever, that it's not going to work.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, so that's just a coincidence, of course. It's nothing more than that. So I head off to the Himalayas to drink some ayahuasca, and then I go off to North India, the mountains, to go on a meditation retreat. And I'm like, I've got to get away from Ibiza if I'm going to do this thing. And then I meet up with my girlfriend at the time, again, very briefly in India, and we enjoy our time together in a similar way. And literally, again, within no time at all, like minutes, I walk out the door, say goodbye, and then I come back in, and on the bed, the light of the phone is on, and then I pick it up. It's like the film's off.
Wow.
With a coggy. And then I just remember thinking to myself, it's like, okay, so... the bit I forgot to tell in the story is like, people when I left Colombia initially, and people were saying, oh, you know that they're going to be watching you, don't you? And I was like, well, no, I don't. Maybe they'll be able to read me or something, and when I come back and read my aura or something to be able... But the fact that they're connecting to me the other side of the planet, I don't buy into that. They're like, well, you wait, you'll see some signs. So I was kind of primed for that, and then I had these two, what I at the time thought were just very strong coincidences, but I was so keen to make this film. It was like, wow, it touched me so deeply that there was a possibility that I could explore the world of these people. And then I suddenly realized, how can I explore the world of these people if I don't even take seriously anything that they're saying before I've even started? Mm-hmm. How arrogant of me. And then I suddenly reflected on myself, oh my God, you've actually done that everywhere you've been. You're the guy that sits at the dinner table and talks about tribal people. You're the guy that is celebrated around the world as the person who is one of the tribe. And you've always looked at them and listened to their tales of their own spiritual traditions through the prism of your own scientific mind, or Western mind.
Yeah.
And even though you've been humble and you've been sweet and you've made dear friendships and you genuine love for these people, you've always held back a little bit of yourself and gone a little bit, I kind of know better. Mm-hmm. And I thought, how arrogant. Who is this guy? This is an awful thing to have realized in that moment. So I thought, well, okay, I would normally see that as coincidence, but perhaps I need to try on another hat. Let's have a look at that as maybe something that's real. I can always put my other hat back on later. It's just an exploration. Let's just explore that. And literally from one moment to the next, my whole life changed.
Wow.
So suddenly there was meaning in everything. Everything was interconnected. As every time a butterfly landed or a person walked into the room, it's like divinely appointed. Or, I just was in this mad space of joy where everything was flowing and everything was a gift and everything had meaning, and it didn't matter how hard something was. That was okay too, because it was just some lesson, and it was all this full of meaning, full of meaning, full of meaning, full of meaning. And that was one of the most amazing sort of shifts in my life. Yeah. And I had a bit of that lasted a while. It's not the space I'm in now.
Yeah.
It's not the space I'm in now. I had a bit of an awakening out of that at one point. But I remember that time with such joy.
Well, I want to share that, you sharing your story when we met and what you had been through, inspired me in ways that I didn't imagine, and so after we'd met and we talked quite a lot, and I just decided that okay, I'm going to try celibacy. It's like I just took the initiation and just decided I'm going to not drink. But it wasn't kind of in a creating rules sort of way. It wasn't like that this is a better way of being. It was just like something from your communication of the initiation that you had been through spoke to my heart, and something in me went, okay, there's another way, like, to try. And I was in a place where for years leading up to that I'd been really cynical and had, you know, the British kind of cynical, the over intellect, the having all these mystical experiences, but then having to take the piss out of them all and having to doubt them all. And I said, okay, I'm going to try celibacy. I'm going to try not drinking, which I had done before at a different point in my life for a year. And I'm going to really see what's left. And also that the intention is to clear, like, my conditioned patterns, so my conditioned patterns around sex, around men, around the addiction to alcohol, all these things, the way that we use them, or the way that I was using them. And it was such a profound experience. And during that time, in all that space, all of these other things came in, whether it was unexpectedly training to be a yoga and meditation teacher, whether it was medicine experiences, whatever it was, like, there was space and I was open to them. And
beautiful.
And like, now there's more balance, you know, but the profound thing that happened to me through that experience of celibacy is it just completely transformed my relationship with my body, and it completely took me out of societal conditioned understanding of intimacy and of the role of a woman and of the way that we date, all of these things that I was, you know, that didn't resonate with me fully, but I didn't know any other way. And somehow through those experiences, I created another way.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, so that's really lovely to hear. And I had a very similar thing. I mean, as you say that, it's like we talk about these things, but actually the lessons I learned, I mean, like giving up drugs, smoking, alcohol, whatever it was actually relatively easy. Mm-hmm. You had to change behaviour a little bit if you're meeting old friends who only drink. If you go to the pub and you're not drinking, you know, there's moments of discomfort, but actually it's relatively easy.
Yeah.
But giving up sex was like a very, very complex journey to go on. You know, and lots of people firstly couldn't understand it. It's like, well, it's natural. Why would you do that? Which of course is true. It wasn't giving it up forever. It was just I was just realigning my relationship with it, and as you say, with my body and with women, and that's what it was. And like you, I had the most wonderful experience, but it took me a long time to get. I mean, I ended up doing 3 years of celibacy in the end.
I did like 2.5.
Did you? Yeah. I kind of needed it. I mean, it was only a year in that I finally, some of the pennies dropped. I mean, initially, I mean, like, this joke here is just laughable if I think about it. I mean, like, my initial approach to celibacy, this shows you where my head was at, was a great chat-up line. You know, I was just lining people up to be first. And I mean, it was just, that was, Bruce is celibate now, and so I was just using that as my line around town. I mean, it's like, it was atrocious. That's how it all began. And then, you know, then of course, because I thought I was going to be making this film with the Corgi relatively soon, and it just didn't happen, just carried on drifting. So this 3 weeks of celibacy ended up being 3 years of celibacy. But every week or every month, there was a new insight, a new thing that shifted inside me. But ultimately, I began to realize and feel energy, if you will call it that. I feel parts of my inner being, my body, and how they responded, and realizing just how my loins had basically driven the show the whole time. And that, I realized that there was a neediness in my connection to women, and it was sexually driven, and that was so prevalent in almost every one of my connections with someone. It's like, am I going to get something out of this? sexually or not. I mean, it's a terrible thing to admit, but I only noticed. It wasn't like so much so that it was in my mind, but by removing it, I realized that it was there in my body somehow. And then suddenly, over a period of a long time, over a year in, I suddenly started feeling something in my chest. You know, and it's like, here's another way of connecting, and then feeling a totally different way. Because only after that time did I realize that it wasn't about what I could get, it was about who is this person, how can I connect with them, who are they? And that was, I mean, it's an awful thing to admit, but that is, you know, the conditioning that I'd had, or whatever it was that had happened to me before, that's what I had become. And then this shift into this other way of connecting, which was so beautiful, and what an amazing gift, and has served me so much better since, you know. And it doesn't mean to say that I'm in any way cured of some of those other aspects of my life, and they come and go, but I know them, and it's definitely a lot better now that I'm back in the world, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not beyond sort of some of my grubby little addictive traits occasionally, but they're not ruling me at all.
I mean, I had an experience where I kind of realized that so much of my identity was based around, you know, like being attractive, flirting, getting attention. And when I then, you know, which is also embarrassing to admit, but then it's also the world that we live in. And, you know, I've been wolf whistled at since I was like 8 or something. So you kind of also grow up like used to this stuff, and then you start feeding on it as well. And so...
Why didn't they? I can't believe that lot of guys didn't wolf whistle me. It's outrageous.
But I mean, maybe it's like that, or maybe it's like you just, you get so used to it, and it's like... And then one of the things that happened after I kind of decided to step back and go into celibacy was that I realized that I wanted to be like really unattractive and sort of invisible to men. And that the only way I could pull that off was sort of like energetically, and maybe like adjusting the way I dressed a little bit, but it was more of an energetic withdrawal of like just not engaging in flirting. And then that meaning that there had to be another way for connection, but it also gave me real space, which was space to develop other parts of myself.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then over the years, it kind of got to a point where I actually started to kind of taste, I guess, the orgasmic nature of nature. Like, it became a place where, you know, as a woman, like that role of like the Shakti and the flow, that I could kind of have something like an orgasm just being in nature and breathing it in. Like I felt like my whole body was being breathed often like by the surroundings. And yeah, it's a very beautiful time. And, you know, and then you go, okay, it's time to get back into the world a bit.
It's true, you know, it's like I'm not. I remember that time in my life with great joy, but I'm not there now, and I am back in a more physical space, and I'm good with that too. You know, I think it is about finding the balance. Nice orgasmic with nature. That sounds pretty good. But I know, you know, just talking about the withdrawal of the energy. It's interesting, isn't it? Because like I lived in Ibiza for 10 years, and so that's the language we used on a daily basis. But I just remember that is so far away from what my previous understanding would have been. That these energy flows within, and also how we are exchanging this whatever it is, let's just call it this energetic flow all the time. I mean, it's so far away from the sorts of conversations I would have had before, but I mean, in the world of Ibiza, it's just that's every day. But just to sort of clarify what that was for me, I mean, I genuinely noticed a massive difference if I was walking down the street and if I could like control my eyes from just checking out every pair of legs and every whatever it was that was beautifully walking past and gratefully received, but the amount of attention that is drawn on a momentary basis constantly and then looking for it versus the withdrawal of that and holding it something inside me and not for some puritanical reason. It's just an experiment. It's like okay, what's that going to be like? And then just being filled with something completely different as a result of, as you just not throwing out that flirty energy or that sort of receptive energy or whatever it is, just being a bit more contained. It was really interesting sort of personal human experiment. Just like, okay, yeah, this shit is real. It's like I can really notice a discernible difference in myself when I don't ejaculate for a few days, or when I do. It's like all of these things. It's like, oh, that's what they're talking about over there. That shit, that makes sense. You know, it's cool. I get it because I'm actually experiencing it. And there's sorts of things that I would just never have done when I was a Marine. It wasn't my sort of daily conversation or way of looking at the world. It was very much a different one. You know, so these have been kind of interesting journeys for me, and you know, I've still got a long way to go in every aspect of my life, but it's definitely helped me a lot in my relationships.
And right now, your film, Tawai, is out. And that's been another massive journey.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Like quite a lot of time, yeah. 7 years or something. Basically, since...
Not that anyone's been counting.
I have. Yeah, so like, you know, I did the Amazon and then I took that time out when I had all those revelations and really started changing. And then I was already in abstinence when I went off to do the Arctic series. And in the Arctic series, I mean, if you look, you have to look very closely, but in that series there is a lot of talk of nature healing. I mean, it's very subtle, but many of the people that we interview, a reindeer herder in Siberia who was previously a drunk, and he came back to the community of herders, and that was his healing. And then this ex-Spetsnaz special forces guy from Russia who's gone out and become a tree, works with the trees now, and that's his healing. And so there's these different stories all the way through of nature healing, actually, and I was really pleased that I could bring that in, because I was having this new awakening to that. But it was almost indiscernible, these messages. They were there only if you're like an aficionado looking for them, really. I wanted to do more. And then it was really weird coming back from the Arctic, which was so clear to me that climate change was real. I mean, there was just no question. I'd been out to Svalbard to meet some of the best scientific minds on the planet who are all studying climate science, and I just felt that they had no agenda. They were just so into their science, and they were so terrified of saying anything because they were just terrified of being vilified by the trolls of big money coming in to tear them apart and ruin their families, and you know, and all the testimonies of the indigenous peoples where the ice was thinning and they couldn't get the walruses anymore, and so, you know, just everywhere I went, there was global warming was part of their lives. And so I came back, it's like, this is really the case. And then, of course, to find it still massively debated, and in the high street, well, everyone's not sure because, like, is it this, is it that? And I was just like, it was just like, wow, this is sad, because it feels really real, and like I get it why we're all trying to stick our heads in the sand, and I get it why it's really hard to take on board, because it means a real reevaluation of ourselves and our lifestyles, and the real acknowledgement that might be the case and that we might be at the heart of it. Just like when I did my trip down the Amazon, we tried to shine the mirror a little bit on our society by humanizing the loggers, by humanizing the drug lords, by humanizing these other people. They're not the problem. Where's the problem? You know, where's the problem? Come on, guys, it's not so hard. Where's the problem? You know, and the same with climate change, but there's sort of mass cultural denial, and then just thinking, I can't play that card anymore. I've just had the curtain ripped back. I've seen the machine. I can't just ignore that. And and then the bee were like, come on then, let's go off down the Mekong and look at China and the waters. And amazing. I mean, what a great gift. What an amazing opportunity. I'm totally, fully aware of the great privilege of my life to have had those opportunities come my way to make real documentaries about really important things. And I don't deny how important they were and still are. But I couldn't just carry on doing that. I was just like, no. I can't go looking at another part of the world where there's another problem. So it's like, I realised we've got shit to do, you know. So that was basically where I realised I had to make a film in a slightly different way. And I tried to pitch it to the Bee, but they understandably were like, Bruce, you've got to kind of do this on your own, I think, because I don't think I explained it very well. I was kind of quite caught up in the sort of language that we're discussing now, which didn't land particularly. And they thought probably I'd just drank one too many cup of ayahuasca and were a little bit like, not sure we know what you're on about, Bruce, a bit. And so we parted sweetly, and I decided I needed to go and do this myself. And that became its own long journey, you know, and became by far the hardest thing I've ever done. And I made every mistake because I directed it myself. Well, I co-directed it with a dear guy from Canada, but I just thought I could say everything and film everything, and just took on this mammoth project. And it was really hard. It was really hard. But we're out the other side now, and it's coming to the world, and we've had to take a lot out just to make it something that's understandable. I mean, the first edits were absolutely incomprehensible to anyone who watched them, because for me all these things fitted. I was like joining all these dots in this scene and this scene and this scene, and it's like and like if you've got that sort of mind, it did fit. But if you had never come across those thoughts or ideas before, it was absolute nonsense. It's like I was just the wrong person to be directing a film, really.
I saw an edit a couple of years ago, but I liked it, but then
because it's your bread and butter. You could join the dots. And but we put it to test audiences, and they were like, well, what's happening? No idea.
But I also think there's something really inspiring about not rushing it. And actually, I was talking to one of our mutual friends about a creative project, and that I'm still working on, that's taking much longer than I imagined. And she said, look at Bruce. And, normally it's like a bit of a joke, oh, Bruce is still making his film. but actually...
Thanks, Amisha. I didn't realise that's what my reputation became recently.
But then actually it was like, oh no, like that's sort of listening to the creative process and not sort of controlling it and taking on, okay, this is the budget, this is the timeline, it's just going to happen in this moment, and allowing it to find its own voice, to evolve, to find the right timing, all of these different things that are actually more like nature. And I actually found that really inspiring, and
Thank you.
I keep that for why my book's taking so long.
Yeah, no, do. It's like, they say no good art is ever completed, it's only abandoned, and I think there's truth in that. I could have carried on forever. It is good to be over. There is more coming out as well, but there's lots that we edited that we took out at the last minute that is needed, that's going to be in there, and that's going to come out subsequently. But we took on a difficult task. I mean, like, if you really scratch beneath the surface of what we're saying in the film, we're challenging nearly every facet of modern society, whether it's science or whether it's the structure of politics or the structure of economics or the structure of... I mean, it's all there, where there's this group who are living almost completely opposite to the way we are. And like, you can just look at it as like, oh, okay, that's interesting, that's how they are. Or you can take it on board and go, wow, that's interesting. Can I apply any of that to our world here? So all of those subjects are incredibly difficult, as well as things like spirituality and belief and religion are all in there too. And so, as well as the consumption and our connection to nature, and it's all there. So it took us 6 months just to write the script, because to get the words where you're not turning people off, you're still inviting, I'm still owning my own part in it. That was one of the biggest things, was like initially the way that I was writing and talking was slightly judgmental towards the audience. It's like, from a place of almost superiority, you've got to wake up, it's like all of that stuff is never going to do anything, but that was the subtle feeling inside of me that was being felt, and so it just wasn't working. So you have to go through the process of putting yourself in it and admitting your own part of it and bringing your shadow into the light, so that you can actually offer it in a loving way, inclusively, and all these things. That just took forever. Otherwise, it would have been a rant. And there are a lot of ranting documentaries out there, and we were just like, we have to try and do something that's more inclusive, that offers a chance to touch people in a way that they might feel differently. And I have no idea if it's going to do that or not. But that's why it took so long. It's not so much the content; it was the tone, getting the tone right. And the other thing was, it took so long because when I first started out, I kind of knew what it was that I wanted to say, and what the film is pretty much what it was that I wanted to say initially. But when I was trying to talk to the team about that, it was very hard for anyone to, probably because of the way I was describing it, was really hard for anyone to actually see what it was that I was saying. So in the end, all these wonderful creatives that I brought around to help me out were like, no, Bruce, we can't really do that. It's like a theory-based film. We'll make a film about you, and you can carry the message. So and I'm like, no, I don't want it to be about me. Can't we just do this thing about these theories? And we don't want a theory film. We want a film. So there's a lot of the filming was about me and my personal story, and there's hope that I was going to sort of have some shift to enlightenment at the end of it, or something, to have some payoff. But there was clearly not going to be any payoff. It was like just some third-rate ex-celebrity having a meltdown with his family doing ayahuasca in the Congo or whatever. It's like, it's just, what the hell's going on? So that we spent a lot of time filming that, and then when it came to the edit, of course, then I had to honour the editor, needed to look at all that to see if there was something in that. It was really exciting because there was sort of lots of dirt on Bruce, and me going, oh my God, this is the most painful thing in the world, watching this potential film coming out of this meltdown of this terrible human being. And and then luckily everyone kind of got on side. It's like, no, that isn't a very good film. And so, but I had to go through that process before what was beneath it, which was this stuff that I kind of always wanted to say. It's like, no, we can actually, it is theory based. Yeah, it is kind of a theory film, but it's like an essay, but it's still fucking interesting. It's compelling. Let's have that. It doesn't have to have me as the protagonist going at all these massive revelations. I mean, there's one or two little ones, but forget me. Let's just say this stuff. People are thirsty for it anyway.
And maybe over these years as well, the thirst for more of this kind of truth and these perspectives has deepened as well.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I mean, I think what was funny, because we did start, I started 7 years ago, and the sort of what we'd call the mindfulness revolution hadn't hit.
Yeah.
I mean, my whole idea of going there to the Penan were meditators, clear to me, they're meditating every day. Mm-hmm. Hunting and foraging is a form of meditation. It was so clear that when they're in their body, in their senses, to catch their prey, they have to be fully present in their senses. It's like you can't be drifting off in your mind. You have to be concentrating and aware fully. And I'd seen the things that had happened to me through my experience with meditation, and also my other plant medicine trips about connection, and was this some other way that they were experiencing the world? Were they feeling more deeply? Were they empathically experiencing some connective way? And so that's what I went to look at, and the fact that they then began to settle and turn to agriculture gave me the sort of the container by which to tell this story, ask the question, is this what might have happened to all of us over time, where we were once meditating every day, and now through the process of turning to agriculture, we don't need to anymore. I mean, you can, but you don't actually need to. But you need to when you're hunting, but you don't need to when you're farming. So in time, may have this been part of the shift that we've all been on to allowing this other operating system, if you will, of our minds to be running away in this other way, because we're not training it. We're not training it to concentrate in the way that we used to. So is this other thing that's come about, where we see each other as separate, where we see ourselves as above nature, and all this other stuff, has this come about as a result of this long journey from agriculture, the beginnings of agriculture? So that became the theory, and to me that was kind of cool. This is like a revolutionary idea. I haven't read about this anywhere. This is something that we can bring for the world. And then it goes like, and then suddenly there's a meditation centre up and down every high street in the country, it's like, which they really wasn't before. You know, it's like suddenly mindfulness is like in the Houses of Parliament being talked about, and it's all there. You know, so I was like, okay, we're a bit behind the curve. We better hurry up and make this film, because there's not going to be any new points left, because it's all coming out.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the rise in availability of like plant medicine experiences in the West has really risen over recent years, and more people have heard of the different medicines. It's
true. Yeah, and we actually went and we filmed in Colombia for the film as well. We did a whole ayahuasca sequence, but we took that out in the end. We filmed in Africa as well, and we took that out too. But they're both going to be released soon after. We kept the film relatively simple as it is, with just this acknowledgement of seeing ourselves and feeling our part of the whole initially. Because in an earlier version of the film we had all these other bits in, like there's this amazing stuff we get in Africa about how the role of women in that particular group, and how they are there maintaining the balance and pointing out things that aren't happening right in the group and all the rest of it. And this was all, there was such depth that we could bring from that into our story too. But when we put them all down on the timeline to make the film, you've just had this experience of seeing yourself as part of it and acknowledging that and that feeling, before then you're going on to the next thing, which is like, and now we can learn how to deal with other people. And I was like, actually it was just too much to have in one film, and it meant you didn't have to sit with that feeling. And what we wanted people was to actually walk out the cinema going with some sort of humble acknowledgement of something and seeing themselves in some other way. So we kind of ended it there, which meant that these other things we'll bring out later, which was a difficult decision as well, because of course we spent so much time going to these countries and filming them and then editing them and thinking they would fit, and then going, oh my God, we've got to take them out. It's so hard.
And so there'll be a series of mini films.
I think
well,
so. Yeah.
That will come.
Yeah, but they need to be contextualized more. That was the other thing. It's like they were just, they're very big points, these next ones, and they need to be held. They need a whole film in their own right, actually. So we need to find some way of bringing them out and holding them in a more understandable way than just having them in as they were in the film. They needed a bit more. So there's more work to do, sadly. Did I say sadly? I did say sadly, didn't I? I just want to go and go foraging in Wales and like not stare at a screen anymore. I mean, I really do. I'm kind of a bit fatigued.
It's an interesting tension, isn't it? Like having realizations that make you want to be more connected to the natural world and disconnected from many of the really fast tools of society, but then also wanting to, be present to where we are, right? That this is the culture that we're born in, and this is, and that having had experiences like you've had, that there's some, sense of purpose to share these messages and to share your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, like, I remember before making Tawai, I mean, like, the biggest debate in my mind was whether I should do it or not. I mean, like, it was so clear to me already that what I needed to do was just go to community and start living my truth from the experiences that I'd already had. I mean, I'd already had the experiences. Film Tawai is just me going a bit deeper on the journey that I'd already been on before, really. It's just taking people out to go and experience the stuff that I'd already received in a way. So I already kind of knew what it was that I was trying to say, and therefore I could totally see the hypocrisy of going off on another journey. It's like, oh my God. And I also knew, that if people are going to receive a message and the messenger isn't, and if it's a difficult message to receive and the messenger isn't wider than white, then we're all incredibly good at throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You're obviously a hypocrite, therefore I'm not going to listen to a word you say. Fuck off. And that's totally understandable. And I could see that it wasn't going to take much for me if I was going to start telling a story about consumption or our lifestyle while I was gallivanting around the world in this high carbon footprint, trying to make that film that people aren't going to hear it. And so, of course, you have to offer yourself within. I can't be like self-indulgent, woe is me, but you have to admit your own part in it. But then there's nuances and complications with that, and how then what are you trying to say then? How do you write that so it still has its impact, but at the same time is inclusive. So yeah, that was there from the beginning of making Tawai, and yet in the end I chose to make the film because I realized that I do have a responsibility. And it was a calling, if you will. It was like, I had spent the time with the indigenous people, and they looked to me to help them, and they looked to me, and I learned so much from them. And then also I had this relationship with the viewing audience as well, who came to their TV sets on a Monday evening to listen. That's an amazing honor to have people come and hear. And I felt that I hadn't told them everything that I had learned, and I felt that they wanted, there was a thirst. So I had this sort of reciprocal relationship with the tribes and a reciprocal relationship with the audience, and I hadn't been tied up, and I couldn't just retire. I couldn't. There's just no way, actually. So I was like, okay, one more, Bruce, just one more. Let's go do it.
And now, of course, and maybe there's a.
Well, no, in that one more, there's these little bit. I don't think I'm going to travel anymore to get these new ones out. I think I can just get them out. Actually, I did a wonderful event last night at 42 Acres, that great space in Shoreditch, and I showed for the first time the stuff from Africa with these amazing women and their role, and I had a whole sort of hour of just talking about contextualizing the images that we're about to see. Okay, here you're about to see this stuff, and it could be quite weird if I don't explain exactly what I think is going on here, and this is my offering, and how am I going to bring this to the world? And it's like, as a guy, how am I going to do this? Is this just a male view? Well, just went into the whole depth of that, and then we filmed that, and then perhaps that could just be the context that then you can see the clip, because the clip on its own doesn't. It's potentially confusing, so it just needs that offering. It needs that soft. This is, I really kind of almost apologetic. I'm sorry that I didn't get enough female voice. I tried, but I wasn't able. But this is what I think's happening, and this is what Ingrid is saying, and this is, and I just feel I need to offer this, but I'm just sorry I can't do it better. But please just take it in the spirit of what it is, and what do you think, and let's have a conversation about this. And, so that was kind of the thing, rather than just putting it in a film and saying, look at this. it needed that much softer space. And so maybe that will be how these next ones will come out, something like that.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it has to come out, but it just needs to be held correctly,
And with this film, with all of these, the different elements of it, what made you decide to call it Tawai?
Well, originally it's called Quest because it was about Bruce Parry's journey, It's like I was on my hero's journey and all the rest of it. Then I realised even the hero's journey was slightly post-agricultural male storyline. It's like, we think of these things as old. It's like, no, actually there's very different ways of telling stories. So we chose Tawai later because I felt that it surmised a big part of what we were looking at. Because the subtext of the film, well, there's many, as you've seen, but is about connection. What is connection? Are these things just metaphors for being close to something, or are there fields of connectivity that we haven't measured yet that we're dismissing, or what is consciousness in this space? Is what all of that. So, what is it to be connected, and how far do these connections go? Is it just, we talk about empathy a lot and feeling. What is the feeling of connection, and is it just to other humans, or is it to other species, or is it also to landscape? And what are these tribes experiencing? And we sort of unpick that the Panan, the main group we visit, have this word which is their sort of feeling for their natural world around them, the place that they live. And so we're sort of asked, well, this is a word that we can't readily translate because we don't have an understanding of connection in any other way than just like a metaphorical one. Mm-hmm. There's no non-material connection that we kind of get. And we definitely don't have this sort of nostalgic sense of feeling for place, or at least, well, we do. Kith maybe is similar, but there's not much that we touch on that's about place. And so I thought that was an interesting one in a film about connection to nature. This was a term that they still have, and we use it a few times in the film. We hear them using the word Tawai. It's like, I feel Tawai. It's like when you come into the forest in the fruit season, you feel held as a mother does her child. It's a guarantee of life. That's why I feel Tawai for this forest. You're like, okay, cool. That gives me an indication of what you mean.
Yeah, it's a feeling. It really is.
Absolutely, and like that sort of being nurtured, being held, sort of abundance. I mean, there's so much. It's so rich. To me, because they use the word about 3 or 4 times in the film, and each time it's slightly different. Another time it's like about I have a longing for the old days and how the green trees were, and that's why I don't want the forest destroyed. It's like, it's a longing. It's like a nostalgia as well. You're like, okay, so there's nostalgia in this word too. It's like, that's why I feel Tawai. It's like reminds me of the past. It's like, oh my God, what is this word? So beautiful.
And having had this enormous privilege to visit so many cultures around the world, is there a feeling or like a theme or something that really does connect us all as humans, something that you just experience time and time again?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a common humanity for sure, definitely. I think that we all want the best for each other and our kids, and we may be carrying a lot of trauma and complications that mean that we act out of all sorts of antisocial and defensive ways, but that's not our default mode. And I think we can be many things, but I do believe that beneath the layers, which we kind of touch on in the film, is like, I mean, we go to India and they say, beneath the conditioning is this sort of wisdom, and I ask, well, what is that? And they go, that's the light, he says with his hand like this, that's the light. And in a sense I like that because I feel that beneath our layers we are positive beings, and we do look for positive ways to be with each other. I think that I don't deny that we can be aggressive, I don't deny that we can be competitive and we can kill and all sorts of things, but I genuinely think that we're positive beings at the heart of it, and I see that so many places, and I mean, of course I can't prove it, it's just a belief, but to me it's, if I have to choose my beliefs, I choose that belief over the other one, which is the one we've kind of built our society over, where if left to our own devices, we'll tear each other apart, and don't go looking inside, because that shit's just dark in there. I mean, that is that's the alternative,
Yeah.
That's the alternative. Well, that's a really shit view of humans. And you go and live with someone like the Panan, who are anarchists, by the way, who have no leader, no law, no shamans, no chiefs. This is the group that we visit, who struck me so deeply when I made the TV series Tribe. And they are, allegedly, the most peaceful people on the planet. And I remember talking to Jerome Lewis, who's the anthropologist, with his wonderful wife Ingrid, when I was talking to them about it, and he goes, yeah, they're the most peaceful. I go, you can't say that. He goes, no, by every measure by which we measure these things, these anthropologists living with these groups for decades, these nomadic hunter-gatherer groups who are living in Africa and Southeast Asia, that are a reflection of our earliest ways of being, who are all what they call instant return, egalitarian groups. They have a number of traits similar. This is how it was before agriculture, and they're all things like sharing, ownership, all that sort of stuff. They don't have no hierarchy, and they're the most peaceful people. And I'm like, okay, well, you're the dude who studies this stuff. This is the experience that I've had, but you're the one who's got the courage to say it. He goes, yeah, say it because it's true, because we've proven it. And I'm like, kind of not going to get involved in all these academic arguments that go back and forth. But for me, he spoke. He's so amazing, Jerome. Wow, what an amazing man. And he's really spoke to my heart. And I realized then, what it was that had affected me so deeply when I first met the Panan, because, I was the guy that went to live with all the tribes. I was the guy that had been around the world. And admittedly, I was only there for a month or so I can't pretend that I know the group inside out. But I used to go there either with anthropologists or having read pretty much every anthropological paper on them. And I went there. I didn't just go in blind. I went there with as much research as possible to each of these different groups, standing on the shoulders of all this amazing work with these people who've lived with them for decades. So I was pretty au fait with the groups, and by and large, I think that I had come to the conclusion that pretty much all human societies were roughly the same. Mm-hmm. That we've all got our ups and downs, we've all got our various traits, and that that we're a microcosm of the macrocosm, or whatever it is, or the other way around, I can never remember. Until I met the Panan, which was the last group, interestingly, of all that I lived with in all of the episodes I've made of Tribe. The Panan were the last, and I genuinely remember going in and going, oh my God, you're making me have to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about human nature and society. They were that different. But I couldn't actually put my finger on what it was that made them that different. It was something about them. It was just like there was something about their way that was incredibly unique, and it was really hard for me at that time to express them, not being sort of trained anthropologist and not being a scientist, and slightly intimidated by that world, and not wanting to be overly romantic, but having had a very unique experience of living with all these groups, in a thoughtful way, a caring way, and then coming across this group and going, no, there's something totally different. And then picking away at what that might have been, which took years, realizing that, I knew that they were the only group that I'd lived with who were nomadic hunter-gatherers living before agriculture. Every other group that I'd lived with had domesticated plants or animals in some way, whether they're domestic reindeer herders or they're farming or whatever it is. They all essentially the product of, or having elements of their lives that are the product of settlement and agriculture. Mm-hmm. So I knew that Panan were different like that, but that didn't explain the real feeling of why they were different. And then it kind of and I knew that they had no hierarchy and stuff, but that didn't feel like the difference. It was something about their way, and that took a long time for me to sort of unpack, and then this whole idea was like, oh yeah, they're meditating every day. Okay, yeah, they've seen themselves as separate and above nature. They're still very much part of the ecosystem, flowing with it, and then learning about, after Jill Bolt Taylor, that thing about the interconnectedness, and then meeting this guy Ian McGilchrist who talks about the hemispheres and how they have slightly different ways of perceiving, and we can operate from these slightly different ways of being, and how if we're in this more balanced meditative state, there's a very real chance that we're experiencing the world through this more empathic felt way. And if you're living in an empathic way, then you're clearly looking for balance. If your pain is my pain, then it's not my interest to hurt you overly or hurt that overly. And if this is our natural state of being balanced inside, then you're going to create a balanced outside society and in balance with nature itself. And it's like, that's what it is.
Totally. That's
what it is. That's what none of us have. They have it, but we're all operating from a different system. Oh my God. That's why they're able to, that's the feeling I had. They're not placing that competition and aggression and all these things. They're just not there. It doesn't seem to be present. And it doesn't mean that they're different human beings. They're just operating in a different way. And, it's only a theory. I'm not sitting here saying this is the truth. This is just, that felt so compelling to me as an explanation for the experience that I had to share it. It's like, that makes sense. I can't tell you it's true, but if people want to hear about my experiences and what I've seen and what I want to bring back from these amazing journeys, I'm sorry if that doesn't land with everyone. There may be competing ideas about that, but I'm really sorry. I've tried and I've listened to many people and I've done as much as I can, but I just genuinely, I've had these experiences and people are really wanting to know what I make of these experiences, and this is what I came with. It's like, this is the best I could do. It's like these people here and what they're saying. Really, these are the best explanations for the experiences I've had.
Thank you for trying, to find a way to explain, because it feels like so much of this is unexplainable. And one thing that's so clear is you can really see in the film how much our way of life, this kind of dominant culture that we're in, how much it affects everyone and everything. And we're caught in this paradox, and we're caught in all this complexity, and you and I are sat here in a sofa in Bloomsbury in London like having this conversation, and then we're probably gonna go out into the world and come across food or things that are packaged in ways that we know are adding to this mess. How do we even begin to comprehend that, and how do we even begin to pull ourselves out of being part of the problem? Just a little question before we close.
I think that what we try to do in the film is where we're at now, it feels so overwhelming. And it feels so painful to acknowledge that, which is why we stick our heads in the sand or go to the bar and just ignore it. Because to actually acknowledge it is so much. And feeling individual is so... it's just so hopeless, the task in front of us. We feel helpless, and I get that. But I think the first thing that we try to do in the film is by showing the journey that we've been on, that this has come about as a result of this shift, let's say, into agriculture and all the things that have, and all the stuff that's happened. It's not only that, but all the other things that have happened. We got to not beat ourselves up. We've got to have some compassion for ourselves. We may be the generation that's waking up to this, but we didn't start it necessarily. We're born into it, and so we've got to be soft. But that doesn't mean. But we still have to have determination and intention to make changes. But I think that what the Panan also offer us, which at the end of the film there's this line where he goes, I don't know about cars or trains or planes that you guys have got, but for me, if it doesn't last forever, I don't want it. Unlike the forest, which will last for at the end of time. And you're like, okay, so this is a fully altruistic statement, and we would see that as like that's a sacrifice that he is making for his children. But he doesn't see it as a sacrifice in the same way. I think that what they offer us is that group of people there, because of the way they're working, because of the way that they're having this empathic connection with that which is around them, they see themselves as a part of something. They see themselves, their identity is very much less individual and much more collective. And they then, I think, because they find their meaning in the collective, they want what they have to continue going. And that's where they find their meaning, and therefore they can find their happiness in that. Where we find our meaning, which is a choice, is also where we can find our happiness. You look at Viktor Frankl's work, that he was in Auschwitz. He was like, those people, you can be the worst conditions in the world, which is pretty hard to imagine anywhere worse than that. But people who found meaning beyond their own personal desires could still find happiness, could survive. Whereas those, if you're only finding your meaning in the pursuit of your own personal happiness, you're going to have a really tough time. Because when it gets shit, then it's shit. But if your meaning is beyond yourself, then you can still go through that. And I think what they're giving us an insight to there is they genuinely don't want those things. Because if it interferes with what their greater cause, which is this lifestyle going forwards, then it's a trade-off that they're not into having. And likewise with us, it's we just have to choose to place our meaning in something else. At the moment we're very individualistic in the way that we're wanting our holidays, wanting our promotions, whatever it is. But look at one moment to the next when we go to war on Germany, and all of our meaning, all of our intention, everything shifts, and then we come together and forget all of our petty stuff that we had, and then get on with this next mission. Or the meteorites coming to Earth, and we forget North Korea, and we just get together. And global warming is that. Totally. Climate change, world suffering is that. And these are ways that we can see that we could come together with this greater meaning, greater purpose, and the joy that can come from having a collective mission is amazing. And I think that that's what they offer us. They choose to see it in the collective greater than the individual. And I think that that's something that's there for us all if we want it. And it's even in a very pragmatic, rational way too, is because at the end of the day, it will make us happier, I believe, coming together. Where so much of where we're at in the world is that we're waking up to the fact that we've managed to do all this amazing stuff. And we're so brilliant at just creating all this amazing stuff, but we're realizing also at the same time that it doesn't actually make us any happier or healthier. A constant journey into isolation and separation. The more money I have, the less I have to deal with people. The more goods I have, the more they own me. The more fame I have, the harder, the more I spread myself thin and have more friends. I'm less nourished on a deeper level. It's like all these things that we're aspiring to in our society are more and more and more actually making us more and more isolated and lonely. Look at the internet. It's like the most amazing tool for connection, yet we feel so lonely because we're not actually truly connecting on a deeper level. And so all of these things that the tribes offer us is this way of coming together again to to find purpose in something that's larger than ourselves. And I think that the connecting, the coming together is also a big part of it. They have that. They're fully connected. There's so much evidence today that shows addiction related to connection. And here, these are fully connected with themselves, with each other in community, with nature. They have tools because they're all living in the same space whereby they exercise all their traumas, whereas we pour them all in and hide them and hold them and pass them all on to our kids in the four walls of the families the homes that we've got. And they don't have that, so they're in every way they're connected so much more. And I think that there's so much in that. And so I think the journey of us coming together and letting go of some of the things that maybe are distracting us is also a really beautiful journey that we'll all be happier with as well, which is like the title of your book. And so I think it would be hard to make some of those initial adjustments, but I think it's totally there. It's totally possible.
Beautiful.
Don't know. I've got to get that last bit a little bit more succinct because it's like it's hard. It is hard to really wrap up what that message is sort of going forwards.
Well, maybe we have to let go of needing to wrap it up into a succinct soundbite, and in a way allow that some of these things need time and space and a lot of words in the absence of just being able to drop into that feeling.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think that's very true. And when we do say it, the sort of like closing words of the film, it's like, to face the feeling. I think that is a big part of it. It's like we have to acknowledge the feeling. Did I forget to turn my phone off?
There is sound coming in telling us that that our time is over.
Oh my Lord. Amisha, that was amazing. Thank you.
And and just for everyone, the website is tawai.earth.
That's right.
And you can find out more there about how to watch the film and all of these extra parts of the film, new films that will come out in the future. Thank you, Bruce.
Hey, thank you. It's really lovely to chat.
Thank you for listening. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our community. If you loved this and would like to contribute to our Patreon campaign or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on community. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes so we can grow. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together.